Okay, so I just learned something that blew my mind. You know how we talk about data breaches all the time, right? Another company got hacked or whatever? Well, on June 19th, 2025, something wild happened. Cybersecurity researchers found what they're calling the largest data collection in human history. We're talking over 16 billion login credentials, usernames, and passwords. Think about it, 16 billion. That's a number that doesn't even sound real. And it's raising some pretty serious questions about what's actually secure in our interconnected world. To put that in perspective, there are about 8 billion people on this planet. So we're talking about enough stolen credentials to give every single human being, including babies who've never seen a computer, 2 sets of compromised login information. That's not normal. The researchers, Bob Diachenko and Eris Nazarovas from Cybernews, they weren't looking for this specific thing. They were doing what's called internet scanning, which is basically like walking through a neighborhood, checking if people left their front doors unlocked. Except instead of houses, it's servers. And instead of unlocked doors, it's databases full of your most sensitive information. And what they found was 30 different databases, ranging from tens of millions of records to one massive collection with 3.5 billion entries, all following the exact same format: website, username, password. Rinse and repeat 16 billion times. Now here's the really concerning part when I first learned about this. These databases were just sitting there on unsecured servers. Anyone with basic technical knowledge could access them. And yeah, before you ask, government data was in there too. We're not talking about top secret Pentagon files or anything like that, but we are talking about credentials that could potentially give access to government employee accounts, contractor systems, various .gov portals that regular citizens use for things like filing taxes or applying for benefits. The implications go way beyond just personal privacy. We're talking about potential national security concerns, the possibility of foreign actors gaining insights into government operations, and the kind of access that could enable large-scale identity theft or fraud targeting government services. When this story first broke, the cybersecurity community basically lost its collective mind. And I get it. The initial reporting made it sound like Google, Apple, Facebook, all these major companies had just been massively breached simultaneously. Headlines were screaming about billions of fresh passwords being stolen directly from tech giants. Social media went into full panic mode. People were changing passwords left and right. Cybersecurity companies were pushing out urgent alerts, and everyone was trying to figure out if they needed to delete their entire digital existence and start over. The story was simple and terrifying. 16 billion fresh passwords are out there, and yours is probably one of them. It was the kind of narrative that spreads like wildfire because it's both easy to understand and absolutely horrifying. The detection process itself is actually pretty fascinating from a technical standpoint. These researchers use automated tools that systematically probe IP addresses across the internet, looking for open ports and databases that respond to queries without requiring authentication. It's like having a robot that goes door to door in every neighborhood on Earth, checking if the doors are locked. Most of the time, they find nothing interesting. Sometimes they find a misconfigured database with a few thousand records, but this time, they found the equivalent of 30 massive warehouses with their doors wide open and billions of valuable items just sitting there. The consistency across all these databases was what really caught their attention. Every single one followed the exact same format, the same organization structure, the same everything. That level of standardization doesn't happen by accident. It screams organized operation. Now here's where the story gets really interesting. And honestly, this is the part that took me the longest to understand. As more cybersecurity experts started digging into this data, the narrative began to shift pretty dramatically. Troy Hunt, the guy behind Have I Been Pwned, basically the internet's unofficial keeper of breach data, he started raising some important questions. Companies like Google and Meta came out saying essentially, wait, hold up, we didn't get breached. And they were right. There wasn't some massive coordinated attack on Google's servers or Apple's databases. But that doesn't mean the credentials weren't real or dangerous. What this actually was is what experts call a compilation breach. Think of it like this. Imagine if someone spent years collecting newspaper clippings about every car accident in your city, then organized them all into one massive searchable database. The individual accidents weren't new, but having them all compiled and easily accessible creates a completely different kind of resource. This 16 billion credential collection is the same thing. It's a systematic aggregation of data from countless previous breaches. LinkedIn from 2012, MySpace from way back, Yahoo's massive breach, plus newer data harvested from malware infections and infostealer programs. Let me walk you through some of the biggest breaches that likely contributed to this compilation, because understanding the source material helps explain why this is so dangerous. Yahoo's breach affected 3 billion accounts. At the time, that was unprecedented, the kind of thing that dominated headlines for months. Equifax hit 147 million people with incredibly sensitive data like social security numbers. Facebook's various incidents affected hundreds of millions of users. All of these breaches, which we treated as individual disasters, were actually building blocks. Each one contributed data to what eventually became this massive, searchable library of compromised credentials. And here's the thing that really bothers me. This demonstrates that data breaches don't just go away. Your password from a gaming forum you forgot about in 2012, it's still out there, still valuable, and now it's been cross-referenced with your more recent information to build a comprehensive profile of your digital life. So what does this actually mean for you? Because 16 billion credentials is an abstract concept until it becomes someone drained my bank account while I was sleeping. The primary threat is something called credential stuffing. Criminals take these massive lists of username-password pairs and use automated tools to try them on hundreds of other websites. And because people reuse passwords, which, let's be honest, most of us do, a password stolen from some random website you signed up for years ago might be the key to your current banking app. But it goes deeper than that. This much historical data allows for incredibly sophisticated social engineering attacks. Imagine getting a phishing email that references not just your current email address, but old accounts you'd forgotten about, previous passwords you might have used, or services you signed up for years ago. How do you argue with someone who clearly has access to information that feels legitimately yours? I've seen examples where scammers reference specific old passwords in their attacks, making them seem impossibly legitimate. Hi, we noticed unusual activity on your account. For verification, can you confirm you previously used the password your actual old password? It's terrifying how convincing that would be. All right, let's talk about what you can actually do about this, because learning about the problem is only useful if you know how to solve it. First thing, and I cannot stress this enough, go to haveibeenpwned.com right now. Type in your email address. If you've never done this before, prepare yourself. Most people discover they've been in multiple breaches without ever knowing it. Next, password managers. I know, everyone says this and it sounds like work, but here's the thing. We're past the point where this is optional. You need unique, complex passwords for every single account, and the only way to manage that without going crazy is with a password manager. Pick one. 1Password, Bitwarden, LastPass, whatever. Just pick one and start using it. For multi-factor authentication, don't just rely on SMS codes. Those can be intercepted through SIM swapping attacks. Use an authenticator app like Google Authenticator, Authy, or Microsoft Authenticator. Those app-generated codes are much harder for attackers to steal. And here's something most people don't think about. Scan your devices for malware. The fresh part of this massive database likely comes from infostealer malware that might still be running on infected computers, quietly harvesting new passwords as people create them. The response from major tech companies has been interesting to watch. Google immediately started pushing their Passkey initiative harder, basically saying, passwords are the problem, let's get rid of them entirely. Apple has been characteristically quiet, but they've been accelerating their own passwordless authentication rollout. What's fascinating is watching the broader industry response. Password manager companies are seeing massive spikes in new users. Multi-factor authentication adoption is skyrocketing. Companies that were dragging their feet on implementing better security measures are suddenly finding budget for upgrades. It's like this breach forced everyone to confront a truth that cybersecurity experts have been saying for years. The traditional password model is fundamentally broken. The good news, and there is some good news here, is that this crisis is accelerating the development of much better authentication technologies. Passkeys are probably the most promising thing on the horizon. Instead of relying on something you know, like a password, they use something you have, your device, and something you are, your fingerprint or face. They're essentially immune to phishing. They can't be reused across different services, and they can't be stolen in a traditional data breach because the sensitive cryptographic material never leaves your device. Hardware security keys are another solution that's becoming more mainstream. These are physical devices that plug into your computer or connect via Bluetooth, providing cryptographic proof of your identity that's nearly impossible to fake or steal remotely. Zero-trust architectures are becoming more common in corporate environments. Instead of trusting users once they're inside the network, every access request gets verified every time. This is the big question, right? And honestly, I think the answer is complicated. On one hand, the threat landscape is evolving faster than our defenses. The tools available to attackers are becoming more sophisticated, more automated, and more accessible. The scale of compromised data available to criminals is unprecedented. But on the other hand, incidents like this force everyone, individuals, companies, governments, to take security more seriously. They accelerate the adoption of better technologies, they change user behavior, and they create economic incentives for companies to invest in stronger security measures. The people who adapt, who embrace these better security practices, who use password managers and multi-factor authentication, and stay educated about evolving threats, they're going to be significantly more secure than they were before this breach was discovered. The people who don't, well, they're going to be increasingly vulnerable in a world where 16 billion credentials are floating around out there, easily accessible to anyone with criminal intent. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The discovery of 16 billion compromised credentials in easily accessible databases represents a fundamental shift in the cybersecurity landscape. It's not just another data breach, it's evidence of a new, more sophisticated, more persistent threat model that affects literally everyone who uses the internet. But it's also a wake-up call. And wake-up calls, as uncomfortable as they are, can be exactly what we need to finally address problems we've been ignoring for too long. The tools exist to protect yourself. The knowledge exists to stay secure. The question is whether we'll actually use them, or whether we'll keep using password 123 and hoping for the best. Because after diving deep into this story, after understanding the scale and sophistication of what we're up against, I can tell you that hoping for the best isn't going to cut it anymore. The digital world just got a lot more dangerous. But for those willing to adapt and take security seriously, it's also about to get a lot more secure. The choice, as always, is yours.